The dawn breaks thin and gray over Guadalcanal, painting the sea in shades of ash. I lie here, my stomach a hollow ache, my uniform little more than rags clinging to bone. My name is Kenji Tanaka, and I am a soldier of the Emperor. Weeks ago, this island was just another name on a map. Now, it is hell. My gaze drifts to the horizon, a habit born of fear and a sliver of desperate hope. And then I see them. Ships. More ships. Not warships this time, but fat, squat transports, an endless chain of them emerging from the morning mist. They sit there, insolent and fat with supplies, a steel city that has sprung up overnight on our ocean. A low growl carries across the water, a sound that has become the soundtrack to our starvation. The American bulldozers. They are already at work, carving roads out of our jungle, reshaping this land as if it were theirs to mold. The entire ocean hums with their engines, a relentless, sleepless thrum that vibrates through the very ground beneath me. It feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? The cheering crowds in Tokyo, the extra ration of sake, the glorious news of Pearl Harbor. We were invincible, banzai. We swept through the Philippines, Malaya, Singapore. We were a divine wind, unstoppable. Our leaders spoke of the Yamato spirit, the indomitable will of the Japanese soldier that would always triumph over the enemy's material wealth. Spirit over steel, they promised. We were taught that one of our soldiers was worth 10 of theirs. We believed that a single, decisive battle Kantai Kessen would shatter their morale and bring them to the negotiating table. We were wrong. We were so terribly, fatally wrong. Here, on this godforsaken island, their spirit is made of steel. While we starve, they feast. I watch through my field glasses as cranes swing crates onto the shore. Mountains of them. Food, ammunition, spare parts. An entire world of fresh supplies stacked high on the beach. Yesterday, a captured American diary spoke of receiving mail from home and eating ice cream. Ice cream. My own ration for today is a handful of uncooked rice, infested with weevils. Their soldiers wear fresh uniforms. Mine is stiff with dried mud and sweat. Their arsenal is a democracy of machines, a flood of production we cannot comprehend. While our shipyards struggled to replace our losses from Midway, theirs were already launching new ships every week. The famed Liberty ships, built faster than we could sink them. They were building a 2-ocean navy while we were patching holes in a 1-ocean fleet. They weren't just replacing their losses. They were multiplying them. Here, courage is not enough. Here, my will is broken daily against a tide of fresh men and new equipment. The heart of their machine is Henderson Field. We were supposed to take it in a few days. That was months ago. We attack it with bayonets and mortar. They defend it with artillery that speaks in a continuous, rolling thunder. We crater the runway with bombs overnight, and by sunrise, their engineers, the Seabees, have laid down new steel matting, and the planes of their Cactus Air Force are taking off again. They rise with the sun, dauntless bombers and wildcat fighters, hunting us in the jungle canopy. They are a swarm of metal hornets, and we have nothing but rifles to swat them down. They call this place the Canal, but for us, it is the grinder. It is where the myth of our spirit came to die, choked on American mud and shredded by American steel. Can a nation's soul defeat a nation that can replace everything every single day? That is the question that haunts my waking hours and my feverish dreams. Down on the beach, the growling of the bulldozers grows louder, more confident. The air begins to vibrate with a new sound, a familiar, terrifying crescendo. From the steel-matted runway, another wave of engines roars to life. I pull out my small notebook, the paper damp and warped from the humidity. My hand trembles as I try to write. The ink bleeds across the page, the words blurring like the future. The engines scream, and the world is nothing but noise and hunger and the impossible sight of those ships on the horizon. The rain never stops. It drums a hollow rhythm on our helmets, a constant chilling reminder that we are a world away from home. Here, on Guadalcanal, the air is thick with the sweet, sickening smell of decay-rotting vegetation, rusting metal, and something worse. Something we try not to name. The nights are the worst. That's when the orders come down, whispered and urgent, crack their lines before dawn. We stumble through the jungle, a black, suffocating maze, our every step a gamble. The darkness is alive with the rattle of rifles, the sudden, terrifying bloom of a flare, and the screams of men. We are told this is for the Emperor, for victory. but victory feels impossibly distant. By night, the Tokyo Express arrives. Sleek, gray destroyers, ghosts on the horizon, slicing through the black water. They don't dock. They just slow enough for us to be thrown into the churning surf, clinging to supplies that often sink before they reach the shore. We swim for our lives, landing on the beach exhausted, soaked, and often with less than we started with. Then, as the first hint of dawn paints the sky, the destroyers are gone, vanishing back into the vastness of the Pacific. They have to, because with the sun comes the enemy. Daylight belongs to the Americans. Their sky buzzes with aircraft, a protective canopy under which their world is built. We watch from the shadows of the jungle as their cargo ships, fat and slow, unload endless mountains of material. Crates of ammunition pile up, barrels of fuel form small cities. Food, so much food. We see them carrying boxes labeled with things we can barely imagine. Canned meat, peaches, chocolate. They build roads through the mud that swallows our own men. They erect sprawling field hospitals with clean white tents. They even get mail from home. Fresh troops arrive, clean-shaven and well-fed, replacing the weary ones. For them, this is a rotation. For us, there is no leaving. Hunger is a constant companion, a dull ache that gnaws at our insides. Our rice rations are cut, then cut again. We hunt for roots in the jungle, chew on leaves, anything to quiet the emptiness. Malaria is a silent assassin, shaking us with fevers that leave us weaker than any battle. A soldier in my unit wrote in his diary, "I am more afraid of the sickness than the enemy's bullets." Another confessed the deep shame he felt after stealing a handful of rice from a comrade's pack. It's the small things that break your spirit. Watching an American carelessly toss away a half-smoked cigarette feels like a physical blow. Their waste could feed a platoon. Why is it like this? The whispers started quietly, then grew louder. Our ships are being sunk faster than we can build them. Our factories can't keep up. Our leaders, they believed in one glorious, decisive battle. The spirit of the samurai against the enemy's machines. They never planned for this. They never imagined a war of endless supplies, a war of attrition fought with production lines thousands of miles away. They miscalculated America's will, its sheer industrial might. They thought the enemy would be soft. But here, their strength isn't just in their guns, it's in their ability to simply outlast us. The faith we carried here, the belief in a swift, honorable victory, is eroding like the shoreline under the relentless tide. It's being replaced by a grim, unspoken understanding. This isn't a battle of spirit. It's a battle of factories, of logistics, of who can put more steel in the air and more food in their soldiers' bellies. And we are losing. We still fight, we still obey, but the conviction has curdled into desperation. Now the fighting is creeping north, island by agonizing island. The Solomon chain is a bloody ladder they are climbing, and we are the rungs being broken one by one. Each island they take is a step closer to home. We can see it on the maps they leave behind. The arrows all point one way north, towards bases from which their bombers can finally reach our cities, our homes, towards the sky over Japan itself. The war is no longer a distant adventure on a forgotten island. It is coming for us. The year is 1944. The place Saipan, in the Marianas. Imagine standing on a white coral beach, the tropical air thick and heavy. You look out at the horizon, and it's not empty. It's blotted out, erased by an armada so vast it defies belief. Hundreds of ships, a steel forest on the water, stretch from one end of the sea to the other. This isn't just an invasion force. It's a floating nation. Come to call. The dread is a physical thing, a cold knot in your stomach. Then the world erupts. The deep, terrifying cough of naval guns begins its methodical work. Each shell arrives like a judgment, turning the meticulously prepared shoreline defenses, the palm groves, the pillboxes, into a landscape of smoke, fire, and splintered earth. Through the chaos, you see the first waves approaching, landing ships. Tanks LS tease their massive jaws yawning open to disgorge vehicles and men. Closer still, the LVTs, the Amtraks, churn through the surf, crawling from the water onto the land like prehistoric monsters. They are relentless, a tide of steel and men that cannot be stopped. Overhead, the sky war is a different kind of terror. You don't see the dogfights, not clearly, you hear them. A distant rolling thunder that isn't weather. It's the sound of the great Marianas turkey shoot, the death of an air force. By the time evening shadows crawl across the ravaged island, the whispers have already started among the defenders. The elite air groups, the pilots we counted on, the pride of the empire. They're gone, vanished into the Pacific. We are alone. As a platoon officer, the reality is stark and simple. I count my remaining grenades. Not enough. Never enough. The man next to me, an engineer, just stares, mesmerized by the sheer industrial might of the enemy. Where there were cane fields just days ago, American Seabees are already at work. They roll out massive steel mats over the crushed coral, creating runways almost overnight. Their efficiency is a weapon in itself. It's surreal, watching them work under the hot sun, as if they're building a new city, not a forward airbase. And then, the ultimate symbol of this new reality. The B-29s. We see them impossibly large, their silver fuselages gleaming, already taxiing on airstrips that didn't exist a week ago. There's no way to comprehend the scale of it. We hear stories from the few prisoners taken, stories that sound like fiction. Back in the United States, they are launching Liberty ships in mere days. New Essex-class aircraft carriers are joining the fleet not one by one, but in a constant, unbroken stream. Factories are printing spare parts, engines, and ammunition with the speed and volume of a printing press churning out newspapers. They aren't just replacing their losses. They are multiplying their strength. For every tank we knock out, 3 more seem to land on the beach. For every plane shot down, a squadron appears to replace it. It's a war of spirit against a war of production, and we are being buried under an avalanche of steel. The final order comes. Banzai. It is the last act of defiance, a spiritual charge against an industrial meat grinder. We fix bayonets and scream, running forward into the darkness. But spirit is met by something else entirely. It's met by a wall of concentrated firepower, a storm of lead so thick you can't breathe without tasting it. It's met by Sherman tanks, their machine guns chattering, their main cannons firing canister shot that turns men into red mist. It's met by flamethrowers that spew liquid fire, erasing everything they touch. The charge, the embodiment of our will, is annihilated in minutes. It simply ceases to exist, swallowed by the roar of the American war machine. A handful of us survive, melting back into the hills, into the caves. That night, we look down from our hiding places. The battlefield is silent now, except for the hum of generators. Below, the half-finished airfield is bathed in the eerie, artificial glow of massive floodlights. The Americans are working through the night, their progress never ceasing. And as we watch them, a chilling realization settles over us. The sky directly above Japan, the sacred homeland, will soon be within their reach. From these new runways, the silver bombers will rise, and the war will finally, irrevocably, be coming home. The circle was closing. Day by day, week by week, the grip tightened. An invisible wall miles deep was rising around the home islands of Japan. This wasn't a single battle, but 1,000 small, desperate moments of strangulation. On the island of Luzon, a young infantryman, his stomach hollowed by hunger, carefully unwraps a silk cloth. Inside is a small, exquisitely carved netsuke, a family heirloom passed down for generations. He looks at it one last time, then trades it to a local farmer for a handful of precious rice. He doesn't know if he'll live to see tomorrow, but he knows he needs to eat today. Further north, on Okinawa, a quartermaster with a grim set face addresses a line of weary soldiers. He doesn't have speeches or promises. He has a wooden crate. He reaches in and places a single gleaming brass cartridge into each man's outstretched hand. One cartridge, that's all. A final line of defense to be held with a single shot. The men take their cartridge in silence. There is nothing left to say. Out at sea, what remains of the Imperial fleet is a ghost. A young sailor, barely old enough to shave, huddles below decks on a destroyer. News crackles over the radio, fragmented and distorted. The super battleship Yamato, the pride of the nation, the largest battleship ever built, was gone. Sent on a one-way mission to Okinawa. It never even saw the shore. Swarmed by hundreds of carrier planes and sent to the bottom of the sea. It was a symbol, and now it was a tomb. The true weapon wasn't always the bomb or the bullet. It was silence. The silence of empty fuel drums stacked like monuments to a paralyzed war machine. The silence of trucks parked in neat rows, their engines cold for want of gasoline. The silence of grounded aircraft, their propellers still, their canopies gathering dust. The submarines, the unseen hunters of the deep, had severed the empire's lifelines. The oil, the rubber, the food, it all stopped. Japan was an island, and now it was truly alone, starving from within. Then, at Okinawa, the silence was shattered by a sound the world had never known. The typhoon of steel. For days on end, the horizon was a solid line of American warships, their guns erupting in a constant rolling thunder. It wasn't a battle, it was an act of geology. Shells the size of men screamed from the sky, plowing the earth, turning hills into valleys, vaporizing ancient tombs and sacred groves. The land itself seemed to heave and shudder in agony. And after the bombardment came the waves. Wave after wave of fresh American troops, hitting the beaches with endless supplies and overwhelming numbers. For the Japanese defenders hidden in a labyrinth of caves and tunnels, it became a grim, horrifying calculus. Hold the line. Fight from the darkness. Make them pay for every inch. The Americans answered with a new kind of hell, the flamethrower. Liquid fire that sought out every crack and crevice, turning bunkers into ovens, consuming oxygen and hope alike. It was a war fought in the dark, underground, a primal struggle of fire against stone, of attrition against fanaticism. And as Okinawa burned, another fire was being prepared for the homeland. From high above, so high they were almost invisible specks, came the B-29s. At first, it was a distant drone, a hum in the sky. Then the drone became a roar, a sky filled with silver wings catching the sun. The bombs they dropped weren't like the others. They didn't just explode. They burst, scattering a thick jellied gasoline that clung to everything. Wood, paper, people. The wind, fanning the flames, created firestorms that consumed entire city blocks in minutes. On the ground, civilians and soldiers, men and women, looked up at a sky that glowed a sickening orange and red. The air itself was on fire. The inferno had no front line. It was everywhere. In the shattered remnants of dugouts and fortified positions across the dying empire, whispers began to circulate. A new weapon. A single bomb, the rumors said, that could wipe out an entire city. Something terrible. Something that defied imagination, whispered over shortwave radios by those who dared to listen. The senior officers, their faces masks of strained resolve, ignored the rumors. They repeated the only orders they had left. Fight to the last man. Defend the homeland. 100 million will die as one. But even as they spoke, the horizon seemed to hum with a strange new energy. A power that had no visible edge, no discernible limit. A power that felt like the end of the world. August 1945. For a Japanese soldier on the coast, it began not with a sound, but with light. A flash on the horizon, brighter than 1,000 suns over a distant city. Then, a silence so profound it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Days later, the news trickled through another city, gone. And then, the unthinkable. A voice crackling over the radio, reedy and unfamiliar, but instantly recognizable. The voice of the emperor, a god made mortal, ordering surrender. The shock was immediate, intimate. All across the islands, men who were preparing for a final, suicidal charge against the invaders slowly, almost reverently, laid down their rifles. Officers, their faces streaked with tears, read the imperial rescript to their troops, their voices breaking. Civilians, gaunt and weary from years of privation, emerged from their shelters. They looked up at the sky, then at each other, standing in a country that suddenly felt fragile and impossibly small. The war was over. But a new, bewildering reality was just beginning. This new reality was one of stark, incomprehensible contrast. On the beaches of Okinawa, where so much blood had been spilled, American supplies were stacked in mountains that seemed to scrape the sky. Trucks, their fuel tanks full, idled in endless lines. For the Japanese, who had fought for every drop of gasoline, for every grain of rice, it was a vision from another world. In the newly liberated prisoner of war camps, Allied soldiers were given fresh bread and new boots, while their Japanese captors had been surviving on scraps. Glimpses of American power were everywhere. Sprawling depots, bursting with equipment. Assembly lines that seemed to churn out planes and tanks with magical speed. It was a humbling, sobering education in modern warfare. The Japanese soldiers' courage had been real, their sacrifice absolute. They had pushed their bodies to the very limits of human endurance. But they had run up against an opponent whose strength was not just in its soldiers, but in its systems. It was a war won by shipyards that never slept, by railroads that crisscrossed a continent, by oil wells that never ran dry. It was won by codebreakers who turned secrets into weapons, and by training pipelines that turned civilians into skilled technicians and warriors. It was a victory of logistics, of industry, of an almost limitless capacity to produce and replace. A Japanese veteran later captured this feeling perfectly. "We fought with everything our bodies had," he said. They fought with a nation that refilled itself each dawn. The individual warrior, no matter how brave, was facing an industrial tide that simply could not be stopped. The courage was real on both sides. The cost was immeasurable. But in the end, the war taught a brutal lesson. Valor alone cannot overcome a system designed for overwhelming abundance. The story of the Pacific War is a story of human will clashing with industrial might, a conflict that forever changed not just the map, but our understanding of power itself. For more untold stories from World War II that explore the space between courage and consequence, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.